Hi everyone, this is Joe Spar, school psychologist and user of Concussion Vital Signs. I'm here today to give you an overview of the Concussion Vital Signs test. A lot of people know some things about Concussion Vital Signs. They know that it's a baseline and post-injury assessment for concussions, but people still have a lot of questions about what the test actually looks like, how it's structured, what the subtests are, how the subtests measure what they're supposed to measure. And because people still have these questions, they don't feel totally comfortable with this assessment. My purpose today is to guide you through a concussion vital signs test. I'll show you the subtests and talk about what they do and why. And that way you'll have much more familiarity with the test and you can understand what it is that you're giving. So in order to understand why concussion vital signs is structured the way it is, the first thing you should understand is that no two concussions are the same. For any given concussion, there are a variety of mental symptoms that might occur. Concussion Vital Signs has a variety of different subtests that examine the cognitive abilities that may be adversely affected by a concussion. That way, you can compare an athlete's post-concussion scores to their baseline scores and see which, if any, cognitive abilities have yet to fully recover.
When students first log in, they'll be asked to enter some demographic information. This allows you to track them easily within the system. The first test the student athletes take is the verbal memory test. As part of this test, they look at a sequence of 15 words. Each word is shown for 2 seconds, and then at the end, they'll be asked to pick the words that were shown from a list. Now that the student has seen all 15 words, a set of directions come up that say that the student has to press the space bar each time that one of the words from the original list of 15 is shown. This upcoming list is going to have much more, so the student has to determine which ones were shown previously and which ones were not. Now you've seen the first subtest, which is verbal memory. There's going to be a visual memory test next, which is the exact same format, except they have to remember visual shapes. Both verbal and visual abilities can be affected by concussions, which is why it's important that there are subtests to look at each of these areas. The next subtest is the finger tapping test. The finger tapping test involves rapidly tapping the spacebar as fast as you can with your right index finger for 10 seconds for 3 separate trials. After that, you do the exact same thing, except you tap with your left finger as fast as you can. The finger tapping test is important because a concussion can adversely affect the speed at which someone is able to perform simple motor tasks. Also, it's nice that Concussion Vital Signs compares the left finger and the right finger for this test, because if you've suffered a concussion and your brain is firing signals faster to one side of your body than the other, then that's a pretty good sign that you need to recover some more before you're ready to play sports again. The next subtest is the symbol digit coding test. On this subtest, the student athlete will be shown a grid that has symbols and numbers that correspond to those symbols. They'll go through some trials on this one where they will see a grid where the symbols are present but the numbers are left blank. It's their job to type in the number that corresponds to each symbol. Because this subtest is somewhat tricky, they get some trial runs before they have to do the one that is actually counted. After the trials are completed, the students take the actual test, which is 2 minutes long, and they enter as many numbers as they can into grids until the time runs out. The symbol digit coding test is useful because it measures, to some extent, speed, accuracy, cognitive flexibility, and visual short-term memory, all of which can be adversely affected by a concussion. The next subtest is the Stroop test. There are 3 parts to this subtest. For the first one, the student athlete will be shown a list of color words in sequential order, and he or she will have to hit the space bar each time one of those words appears as quickly as they can. For the second part of the Stroop test, color words will again be shown, but this time they'll all be displayed in different color fonts. It's the student athlete's job to press the space bar whenever the font color matches with the word itself. So if the word green appears in green font, then the student has to hit the space bar. But if the word green appears in red font, for example, then the student should not hit the space bar. The third part of the Stroop test is very similar to the second part of the Stroop test. The difference is this time the student athlete hits the spacebar only when the font color and the word do not match. So, for example, if the word green appears in blue font, then the student athlete should hit the spacebar. Whereas if the word yellow appears in yellow font, for example, then the student should not hit the spacebar. The next subtest is the shifting attention subtest. For this subtest, there's going to be a square or a circle at the top. It's going to be either red or blue, and it's going to say match color or match shape. The student athlete has to follow those directions and then either press the left arrow key or the right arrow key, depending on whether they have to match the shape or the color. This subtest is similar to the Stroop test in that it also measures speed, accuracy, and cognitive flexibility. It really allows us to see how well the student athlete is able to adapt to rapidly changing directions. The next subtest is the continuous performance test, and this one is very simple. The student athlete will look at the screen, and every couple of seconds there will be a letter that quickly flashes on the screen. Anytime the letter B appears, the student athlete has to hit the spacebar as quickly as possible. This subtest is useful because it measures the student athlete's reaction time as well as his or her ability to sustain attention on one particular task for a long period of time. This subtest takes 5 minutes, so they have to be engaged and attentive for a full 5 minutes. Oftentimes, people who have experienced concussions fatigue very quickly, so staying engaged for that full 5 minutes can be very difficult. Now we've reached the final part of the test. Do you remember at the very beginning of the test when there was a verbal memory subtest where 15 words were displayed and the student athlete had to remember them? Well, that looks more at short-term verbal memory, where this final part looks more at long-term verbal memory. So the student is going to be shown a list of words again, and they'll have to pick out which of those were in that original list of 15 that they saw at the beginning. Next, the student athlete will do the same thing, but this time with the visual shapes that were shown at the beginning of the subtest.